"Old man, get on the ground!" the robber screamed, waving his gun at Frank Morrison. But Frank didn't move fast enough for the criminal's liking. The robber assumed he was dealing with a confused pensioner who didn't understand the danger. He had no idea that Frank was deliberately staying calm, memorizing escape routes, counting ammunition, and calculating the best positions for police intervention. When the siege ended without casualties, investigators realized the 78-year-old customer had essentially run the tactical operation from inside. Welcome to Anzac War Stories. Before we begin this incredible story of quick thinking, tactical expertise, and the moment when a routine bank visit became anything but routine, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this video today? And if you believe that real heroes don't wear capes, they carry walking sticks and withdraw their pensions, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Commonwealth Bank on Collins Street was having a quiet Tuesday morning. The autumn sunshine streamed through tall windows as a handful of customers went about their routine banking. Tellers processed transactions with practiced efficiency, while a security guard sat near the entrance, more focused on his newspaper than potential threats. Frank Morrison had walked the 4 blocks from his Prahran flat to deposit his grandson's birthday money, $50 he'd saved from his pension over 2 months. At 78, these small gestures meant everything to him. Tommy's 9th birthday was coming up, and Frank wanted to make sure the money was safely in the bank before he forgot about it. He'd dressed carefully for the outing, pressed gray trousers, a button-down shirt, and his brown cardigan. His walking stick tapped softly against the marble floor as he made his way to the customer seating area. The queue was longer than usual, so Frank settled into a chair near the front windows to wait his turn. The bank's interior was all polished surfaces and corporate efficiency. Security cameras monitored every angle, though Frank noticed they were positioned more for theft prevention than tactical advantage. The layout was typical. Teller windows along one wall, customer service desks in the middle, ATMs near the entrance. Frank's military mind automatically cataloged escape routes, sight lines, and defensive positions, old habits from Vietnam that had never quite faded. At 10:47 a.m., everything changed. The man who burst through the front doors looked ordinary enough, mid-30s, average height, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. It was the sawed-off shotgun in his hands that transformed him from customer to threat in an instant. "Everyone on the ground, now! This is a robbery!" The reaction was immediate and predictable. Customers screamed, tellers ducked behind their windows, and the security guard fumbled for his radio. Frank watched it all unfold with the calm detachment of someone who'd seen real combat. The robber was clearly inexperienced. His hands shook as he pointed the weapon around the room, his voice cracked with adrenaline, and he'd made several tactical errors already. He'd entered during peak hours, hadn't disabled the security cameras, and was allowing too much time for police response. "I said everyone on the ground!" the robber screamed again, this time pointing the shotgun directly at Frank, who was still sitting calmly in his chair. Frank looked at the young man with mild curiosity. "I'm 78, son. Getting down on that marble floor might be easy for you, but getting back up would be a challenge for me." The robber's eyes narrowed behind his makeshift mask, just a bandana that didn't fully conceal his face. Another mistake. "Old man, I don't care how old you are. Get on the ground or I'll put you there." Frank slowly began to stand, using his walking stick for support, but instead of lying down, he moved deliberately toward a pillar that offered better cover and a clearer view of the entire bank. To the robber, it looked like confused compliance. To anyone with tactical training, it was textbook positioning. "Where's the manager?" the robber demanded, swinging the gun toward the tellers. "Open the vault!" Now, the bank manager, a woman in her 40s named Jennifer Walsh, emerged from her office with her hands raised. "Please, don't hurt anyone. We'll cooperate fully." Frank continued his slow movement around the bank's interior, ostensibly following the robber's instructions, but actually positioning himself strategically. He counted windows, noted the angle of security cameras, and assessed the robber's ammunition. Single-barrel shotgun, probably 3 shells maximum given its modification. No backup weapon visible. Exit strategy unclear. Outside, the first police sirens were already audible. The silent alarm had been triggered the moment the robber entered, and Melbourne's tactical response team would arrive within minutes. Frank knew this, but the robber clearly didn't. That's when Frank noticed something crucial. The robber kept glancing toward the rear exit, a fire door that led to an alley behind the bank. He'd planned his escape route, which meant he'd done reconnaissance. This wasn't completely random, but his nervousness suggested it was his first attempt. Frank moved closer to the front windows, still maintaining his confused elderly act, while actually positioning himself where he could observe both the interior situation and the police response outside. Through the glass, he could see unmarked vehicles taking positions across the street. "Hurry up with that vault," the robber shouted at Jennifer, who was explaining that the time lock system prevented immediate access. Frank caught the attention of a police sniper positioned on the building opposite. Using hand signals he'd learned in Vietnam, subtle gestures that looked like an old man steadying himself, Frank began relaying tactical information. One finger held up, then pointed toward the shotgun. One weapon, 3 fingers, then a circle motion, 3 rounds maximum, pointing toward the rear of the bank, then a walking motion with his fingers. Planned escape route. The police sniper, Sergeant Mike Chen, had been watching the elderly hostage through his scope, initially concerned for the man's safety. But the hand signals were unmistakable. Military field communication, precise and informative. Someone inside was providing tactical intelligence. Back in the bank, the robber's frustration was mounting. "This is taking too long. Open that vault or I start shooting people." Frank moved again, this time positioning himself near the customer service desk where he had a clear sight line to both the robber and the rear exit. To everyone else, he looked like a frightened pensioner trying to stay out of the way. In reality, he was controlling the entire tactical situation. Through the window, Frank could see more police units arriving. He held up his walking stick vertically, all clear, no immediate danger to hostages. Then he tapped it twice against the floor. Suspect getting agitated, situation escalating. The robber noticed Frank's movement. "What are you doing over there, old man?" "Just trying to stay out of your way, son," Frank replied, his voice carrying the tremor of fear that wasn't entirely feigned. "My legs aren't what they used to be." The robber bought the act completely. To him, Frank Morrison was just another terrified senior citizen, no threat at all. He turned his attention back to the vault situation, giving Frank the opportunity to signal more information to the tactical team outside. Frank pointed subtly toward his own chest, then made a small waving motion. Hostages okay, no immediate medical emergencies. Then he held up his hand with fingers spread, followed by closing it into a fist, 5 minutes maximum before suspect likely to attempt escape. Detective Inspector Sarah Williams, commanding the response from the street, received the sniper's translation of the signals. "Sergeant Chen, you're certain these are military communications?" "Absolutely, ma'am. Someone inside has combat training and is giving us real-time tactical assessment." Frank's next signal was crucial. He pointed toward the rear of the bank, held up one finger, then made a cutting motion across his throat. The message was clear. Suspect planning to exit through rear door in approximately 1 minute. Recommend interdiction. The timing was perfect. Just as Frank had predicted, the robber began backing toward the fire exit when he realized the vault wouldn't open quickly enough. "This is over," the robber shouted. "Everyone stay down for 10 minutes after I leave or people die." But as he reached for the rear door handle, tactical officers were already in position. The door opened to reveal 2 heavily armed police officers blocking his path. "Drop the weapon!" "Police!" The robber spun around, raising the shotgun, only to find Frank Morrison standing directly in his line of fire to the front windows. Not by accident, but by careful positioning that prevented the robber from using the weapon toward the street where officers were positioned. "It's over, son," Frank said quietly. "Put the gun down." The robber stared at the elderly man, who somehow seemed different now, calmer, more authoritative. Who are you?" "Someone who's been in tighter spots than this," Frank replied. "The police have the building surrounded, you've got nowhere to go, and you haven't hurt anyone yet. Make this easy on yourself." The standoff lasted only 30 seconds. Faced with tactical officers front and rear, and an old man who somehow radiated more confidence than fear, the robber slowly placed his weapon on the floor and raised his hands. Within minutes, the bank was secured. No shots fired, no injuries, no casualties. A textbook resolution to what could have been a tragedy. As paramedics checked the hostages and officers processed the crime scene, Detective Inspector Williams approached Frank, who was sitting quietly in his original chair, waiting to give his statement. Mr. Morrison, I'm Detective Inspector Williams. My officers tell me you provided tactical assistance during the incident. Frank looked up with mild surprise. Did I? I was just trying to stay out of the way. The signals you made to our sniper team were military standard. You provided crucial intelligence that helped us resolve this safely. Frank was quiet for a moment. Old habits, I suppose. Where did you serve, Mr. Morrison? Vietnam, 7RAR, long time ago. Detective Inspector Williams nodded slowly. Your assistance today prevented potential casualties. That was exceptional work. Frank shook his head. Nothing exceptional about it, love. Just seemed like the right thing to do. The bank security footage, when reviewed later, told an extraordinary story. While other customers had panicked or hidden, one elderly man had systematically positioned himself to control the tactical situation, communicated with police through military signals, and ultimately blocked the suspect's line of fire during the arrest. The footage went viral within 48 hours, not sensationalized or exploitative, but shared by law enforcement agencies as an example of extraordinary civilian assistance. Comments poured in from military veterans recognizing the tactical expertise, from police officers praising the coordination, and from ordinary people amazed by Frank's calm competence under pressure. Frank Morrison never saw the video. He didn't have social media, didn't follow online discussions about the incident. He simply went home to his flat in Praran, made himself a cup of tea, and sat by his kitchen window reading his newspaper. But Detective Inspector Williams made sure Frank's assistance was formally recognized. A letter of commendation was sent to the Victoria Police Commissioner, noting that civilian cooperation had been instrumental in the safe resolution of the incident. 2 weeks later, Frank returned to the same bank branch to complete his original transaction, depositing Tommy's birthday money. The staff recognized him immediately. Mr. Morrison, said Jennifer Walsh, the manager who'd been threatened during the robbery, we can't thank you enough for what you did. Frank handed her the deposit slip. Just $50 for my grandson's account, please. No, I mean during the robbery. You kept everyone calm, helped the police. You were incredible. Frank considered this while Jennifer processed his transaction. Ms. Walsh, I've been in situations where keeping calm was the difference between going home or not going home. That young man was scared, not evil. Sometimes scared people make bad choices, but they don't have to make worse ones. Do you think he'll be okay? Police told me he's got no prior record, family troubles, lost his job recently. Sometimes people just need help finding a better path. 3 months later, Frank received an unexpected visitor. The young man who'd robbed the bank, now out on bail and awaiting trial, stood nervously at Frank's front door. Mr. Morrison, I'm David Chen. From the bank. I wanted to apologize. Frank invited him in for tea. They talked for 2 hours. David explained his circumstances: unemployment, sick mother, mounting debts, desperation that had led to a terrible decision. Frank listened without judgment, offered practical advice about legal aid and social services, and made it clear that one mistake didn't define a person's entire life. At David's trial 6 months later, Frank Morrison appeared as a character witness. His testimony helped secure a suspended sentence with community service rather than prison time. David Chen went on to find steady employment and volunteer with youth programs, sharing his story to prevent others from making similar choices. The bank robbery became a training case study for Victoria Police, not because of the criminal tactics, but because of the civilian response. Frank's actions demonstrated how military experience could be applied to civilian crisis situations, how clear communication under pressure could save lives, and how treating suspects with dignity could lead to peaceful resolutions. But Frank Morrison continued his quiet routine: pension collections, grocery shopping, visits to his daughter in Sydney. When people recognized him from the news stories, he'd politely deflect attention and change the subject. When military veterans approached him to discuss his service, he'd listen to their stories more than tell his own. The walking stick he'd used to signal police tactical information continued to be his daily companion, tapping softly against pavements as he made his regular journeys around Praran. To most people, he remained what he'd always been: a quiet, elderly man going about his business, carrying the weight of experience that most would never see. 1 year after the incident, Commonwealth Bank sent Frank a formal letter of appreciation and an invitation to their annual customer appreciation event. He politely declined the invitation, but kept the letter in his kitchen drawer next to Margaret's photograph and his service medals. The letter read, "Mr. Morrison, your extraordinary courage and tactical expertise during the robbery incident exemplified the very best of civilian cooperation with law enforcement. Your actions undoubtedly prevented casualties and demonstrated that heroism comes in many forms." Frank had smiled when he read it, then placed it with his other quiet mementos of a life spent serving others, whether in uniform or civilian clothes, whether in war zones or bank branches in Melbourne. Tommy's 9th birthday party had been a success, funded by the $50 that had originally brought Frank to the bank that day. The boy never knew that his grandfather's simple transaction had turned into a masterclass in crisis management, or that the quiet man who helped him blow out candles had once again proved that real strength isn't about recognition. It's about knowing what to do when others don't. So tell us, have you ever witnessed someone remain calm during a crisis when everyone else panicked? Someone whose background you never would have suspected, who took control of a dangerous situation with quiet competence? Someone who proved that heroism isn't about age or appearance, but about experience and character? Share their story in the comments. Tell us how they handled the pressure and what you learned from watching them work. Because here at Anzac War Stories, we believe that the most effective leaders are often the ones no one notices until they're needed most. Subscribe to make sure these stories of quiet courage and tactical brilliance continue to be told. And remember, sometimes the person sitting quietly beside you has been through situations you can't imagine, and when crisis strikes, they'll know exactly what to do, lest we forget.